Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin in just a second and will be recorded. Please feel free to connect with us on social media. At Twitter, you can follow us at Reading by Third, and on Facebook, you can like our page at Campaign for GLR. Feel free to tweet with the hashtag GLR Reading and hashtag Learning Tuesdays, and we will be sure to retweet. We welcome you to share any thoughts or reflections that you have after viewing this webinar. And once again, feel free to follow us on either of our pages at Reading by Third or Campaign for GLR. The webinar will begin in just 1 second. Okay, once again, welcome to the webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes working to transition the slides and make everything run smoothly. Before we begin, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping tips. First, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. Share your name, city or state, and your organization, and be sure to select both panelists and attendees when responding so that we all know who is here. All attendees are participating in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement through the use of the chat box at the bottom of your screen. We also ask that you post any questions that you may have in the Q&A box. We will be sure to answer those questions within the last portion of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available to all who registered. This webinar is also being live streamed on Facebook as well on our Facebook page. And lastly, we would just like to encourage all of you to participate in taking the brief evaluation survey that will be posted during the Q&A portion of the webinar. This just helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Before we begin, I would also just like to turn your attention to a few of our upcoming webinars. Next Tuesday, November 17th at 12:30 Eastern Time, we have Making Small Moments Big for Children's Early Brain Development with the Clinton Foundation. And later that afternoon, we have Parent Coaching, a Key Ingredient to Parent and Child Success. On Tuesday, November 24th, we have Teaching Early Reading with a Digital Mindset. And lastly, on Tuesday, December 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time as well, we have Virtual Tutoring, How Programs Are Pivoting to Combat Learning Loss. Now I will turn it over to Sarah Torian to kick off this webinar. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar. A Science Matters session exploring what science and practice tell us about both the importance and potential of early math. For several years now, the campaign has been intentionally drawing the connection between early literacy and early math, grounded in the science of early learning and under the common theme of early school success. Our work to lift up early math is centered around our focus on parents and how we can equip parents with what they need to best support their children in the development of both early math and early literacy. And so we've worked to promote this issue in a variety of ways across our network of 350 plus GLR communities, including it as a part of our Pacesetter Award criteria in workshops and discussions with local funders at our conferences and in a recent funder-to-funder conversation, as well as in our publications and reports. And we're deeply appreciative for our relationship with both the Heising-Simons Foundation in their leadership on this topic, as well as with the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, or NAFSCE, which has been a critical campaign partner, both in our focus on parents as well as this focus on early math. And we're very excited that both of them are playing a leadership role with us in today's webinar. Today's conversation is really an exciting one for us as we continue to grow our body of work around early math, support our network in better understanding the science behind early math learning, and deepen our efforts to support those who work with parents to support their children's mathematical brain building. And so to begin that conversation today, I'm incredibly honored to welcome and introduce our moderator for today, and that's Kimberly Brenneman. Kimberly has deep expertise in early math, currently serving as the Education Program Officer at the Heising-Simons Foundation, where her portfolio focuses on early math. But even before going to Heising-Simons, she led projects focused on curricular and instructional practices to foster science, technology, engineering, and mathematics learning for young children when she was at Rutgers University National Institute for Early Education Research. And she also contributed to the development of educational media resources to support math and science learning for preschoolers. So welcome, Kimberly, and thank you so much for joining us today as we continue to lift up and explore opportunities for early math.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to present this webinar with leading organizations in early learning and family engagement, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, and NAFSCE is brought along as part of the Erikson Institute. Though each of these organizations brings a different lens to its early learning work, all of them are working to forge a future in which math is a part of any early learning strategy. We're so fortunate to be joined by some incredible panelists today. I'm going to do some brief introductions, although you have longer descriptions of all of their expertise in your registration materials. Eric Deering is joining us from Boston College, where he's a professor. He'll be talking with us today about the role of early math in children's development, really diving into the large-scale research studies and what they have to tell us. He'll pass it off to Jennifer McCray, who's a principal investigator at the Erikson Institute Early Math Collaborative. Jennifer is going to talk about putting the science of early math into good use in the learning environments in which children find themselves, specifically early childhood classrooms. After that, we'll hear from Margaret Caspe, who's a research consultant with the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, as well as Gigliana Melzi, who is an associate professor at New York University. They're going to talk to us about their research with families, finding out the incredible ways that families are already talking with their young children about math and doing math with them. They'll then pass it off to the founder and CEO of MathTalk, Omowale. He'll be a commentator for our panel today. He'll also talk about his work taking the science of math and putting it into use in MathTalk. I know you'll enjoy that conversation. And then finally, we'll hear from the executive director of NAFSCE, Vito Borrello, who's going to talk to us about some new work that NAFSCE is doing in family math. So we're so fortunate today to learn with and from these leaders in early math. Many of today's panelists, by way of a little bit of history, are part of a national group that has designed and implemented a family math roadmap. This group, led by Education First, has been asking what it would take in research, practice, communications, and advocacies to elevate understanding about the critical role of families and communities in supporting each child, every child, to be a confident, proficient, and joyful math learner. One of the roadmap project's recent accomplishments was the naming of NAFSCE in partnership with Erikson as the home of what we plan to be a national center for family math. You'll hear more about that from Vito later. Before we move on to Eric, though, I wanted to give everyone just sort of a quick grounding in some of the definitions that we're using in our webinar today. When we're talking about early math, we're talking about the math that happens before children go to kindergarten. We're talking about children 0 to 5. For some people, that's a little surprising because math is often thought of as just something you do at school. It's a school subject, so you wouldn't be thinking about doing that before children go to school. But in fact, math is a language. And just as we understand that for children to become fluent in their spoken or signed language, they need to hear language, they need to hear songs, they need to have conversations with other people. The same way that we want a rich literacy and language environment for young children to become fluent, we also want that rich math environment for them to become fluent in math. When we talk about family math, we're obviously talking, we're talking about more than parents. We're talking about siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents, also family friends, and any community member who cares about a young child's learning. Family math are those activities that happen outside of the classroom within the context of family relationships in the home, in the community, and in everyday life. These activities are ones that support young children and their families to strengthen their math awareness and their math concepts, and to feel enthusiastic and confident about their math abilities. We really want children to develop strong math identities and strong math skills. These are their right, and they will help them to succeed in school and in life. So now I am pleased to pass the baton over to Eric Deering to talk to us about the science of early math.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm delighted to be participating in this webinar today. And as Kim mentioned, I'm going to kick things off by talking about the role of early math in children's development and using the state of the evidence, the state of the scientific evidence, that is. And I'm going to start off by talking about some evidence from large-scale correlational and experimental studies. So about 15 years ago now, but then increasingly over the last 15 years, we've learned more and more about children's early math skills and what appears to be their great importance. And part of that evidence has come from large-scale correlational studies demonstrating that early childhood math skills are correlated with achievement both in math and in reading through middle childhood and into high school. And so these are studies that have looked at literally thousands of children across the country, looked at their math skills in early childhood before they've gotten to school, and found that those skills predict how well children are doing in math and reading into middle school and even on into high school. And this is exciting news because it points towards the importance of early math, it points towards the importance of early childhood and home environments, families, communities, early care and education settings. But it's also important to remember that early math skills are not an inoculation against later underachievement. In fact, we're not going to find much out there that will be. It is, in fact, necessary, regardless of the skill levels that children show up at kindergarten with, that they have supportive environments that are going to help them sustain and build on those skills. And that's an important lesson to be thinking about throughout what I'll be reporting. A second important point here is that growth in mathematical thinking doesn't stop at the end of early childhood, right? This is something that's going to be continuing through the early school years and well beyond. And that growth during the early school years is also highly predictive of later achievement. So it's not the case that kindergarten through third grade math is not as important as early math. It's also important. It just turns out that even before the kids get to school, that's a critical time as well. So the third thing I want us to remember as we're thinking about this is that mathematical thinking, literacy in language, and self-regulation, as well as all of the other developmental domains, are all entwined in the developing child in really synergistic ways, such that despite the fact that it's a cliche at this point, we are talking about the whole child's development. And we talk about that for good reason, because we want to be supporting literacy and language while we support mathematical thinking, while we support self-regulation, because each of these developmental domains are supporting one another. So I also want to move, though, from these large-scale studies to some smaller studies of the home environment. And so, as I mentioned, one of the important pieces of this evidence from the large-scale studies is that it points towards home environments being critical. And as we look at home environments, there have been a number of smaller studies with smaller number of participants and smaller number of families, but very intensive in terms of following these families over time with multiple observations, for example, across infancy and toddlerhood and early childhood. For example, Susan Levine and some of the other scholars that I've listed at the bottom of this slide have done a lot of this intensive work. And some important findings from that work. One is that relative to their talk in general about other topics, parents on average, at least in the US, but really it's true around the world as well, engage in relatively little early math talk with young children, but there's tremendous variation. And so some families engage in almost no math talk, so talking about numerical concepts and talking about spatial concepts. Others have a lot to say about those concepts and do a lot of talk with their children, relatively speaking. And what's important about that is that we know that parents talk about key early math concepts, for example, cardinality, which is this fancy early math word of saying that we're counting sets of objects. So we're counting 3 apples, and we say 1 apple, 2 apple, 3 apples. That third number, 3, tells us how many apples there are. It tells us about the set size. And when parents are talking about that, that is correlated with their children's math skills well into elementary school when they're talking about those things in toddlerhood and early childhood. So, doing more math talk appears to be a good thing, and not just in correlational studies. So, also in interventions that have been designed to increase parent early math talk, for example, through enriching storybooks with math concepts. We know that that math talk actually improves in a causal way children's early math knowledge. We see some very similar findings in early care and education as well. And so there's kind of some similar themes here. So when we look at both small scale and large scale studies of early child care and preschool settings and other early education settings, we see that on average, there's relatively little time spent on math learning activities in preschool classrooms. But there's tremendous variations in both the instructional time and the amount of talk, and those variations are correlated with children's math learning gains. Moreover, some very large scale experimental studies have been done. For example, Doug Clements and his wife Julie Sarama have done fantastic work looking at their building blocks curriculum in a randomized study. So randomly assigning children to use a high quality curriculum or not in their preschool classrooms, and finding initially quite large gains in children's math knowledge when they're in this preschool years. I do want to say again, though, even with these causal, powerful experiments with great curricula, it's not an inoculation. And so they are finding that children who are going into less supportive environments, those skill gains are harder to sustain. So moving to the next slide, I do want to then just wrap up with some promising directions, because I've really given you a lot of work that's been happening over the last 15 years. There's really a new, exciting set of studies that are being done right now, for which we don't know all the findings, but we see a lot of promise. And those studies all fall into a category of what I'll call partnership studies. And these are partnerships between families, communities, practitioners, and researchers. And so rather than researchers coming from their ivory tower down and talking about, oh, we know these math skills are really important, and we know this way is how children develop cognitively, instead, really beginning in relationship and building from the expertise that families bring, that community organizations bring, that practitioners, and that then researchers can help complement. And so I want to talk about a few ways to think about this. One is that we are learning more and more that families have powerful legacies of mathematics. And this has been true across history, and it is true across cultures. And these legacies continue today in family life. And we see this in day-to-day life in all families and in all communities in the ways that our life is just naturally enriched with mathematics. We also know, we're learning more and more about this, that even though families, and this is true more than ever with the pandemic, even though they're facing systemic, social, and economic challenges, it's also true that in all of these environments, families are clever innovators. And that's true with early math. Even families who have not themselves had positive experiences in school with math, they are clever innovators, and they are also resourceful in investing in their children's thriving. So the wave of research that is proving quite fruitful at this point is building on that, moving from what it is that families already know, what they're already doing really well, and capitalizing on that. And so we've seen, for example, increasing evidence from around the country and from around the world that there's great power in co-designed learning enriched spaces. So co-design meaning researchers working in partnership with practitioners, communities, and families. And so and by enriched spaces, we mean parks that have been enriched. We're going to hear a lot of this work has been done by folks like Omo, who's going to be presenting later. This has been done by others like Andres Bustamante in grocery stores, and where families are helping develop the enrichments that are in these environments. And then we're watching to see the ways that these are having powerful effects on family life and child outcomes. And so I just want to wrap up with that point and then turn it over to my good colleague, Jennifer McCray, who is at the Erikson Institute.
Hi, thanks, Eric. That was amazing. Wonderful job. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer McCray, and I work at the Erikson Institute in Chicago. It's a graduate school focused on child development. So people come there, they get a master's degree, and they're preparing to work with children between the ages of birth and 8 and their families in one way or another. It could be mental health, could be education, could be policy. There are also projects there. And one of those projects is the one that my colleagues and I work on, which is the Early Math Collaborative. We focus mostly on providing professional development to teachers. We do a lot of work in Head Start. And lately, the work has been moving in some of the directions that Eric was alluding to, partnering more closely with communities and families. So I want to kind of take you on a journey that helps you think about what we think about when we're trying to help teachers mathematize their classrooms. So one of the things that we need to talk about is here we are on our Zoom call, and I wonder how many times someone has heard someone say, "I'm just not a math person." You know, I may have said that too in my past. I bet many of us have said that. It is a common statement in our country, unfortunately. And the reason that it's unfortunate is that when you say that, you kind of give up. You give yourself an excuse or an out, when in fact, what we want is a culture in which we're embracing the learning about math and we have positive math identities, right? So let's go on to the next slide, because I want to tell you about how that has implications for the wonderful early childhood caregivers who are working in Head Starts. Here's a situation, right? We've got an honest applicant to the teacher ed program. She wants to be a teacher and she's talking to a very well-meaning teacher educator. And she says, "I love children, but I hate math." And you know, this conversation has happened many times. And the well-meaning teacher educator says, "That's okay, you can teach early childhood. The math there is just numbers and shapes." And our applicant says, "Good thinking, they mostly learn that on their own anyway, right?" And this idea, it might seem like it wouldn't be too harmful, but in fact, it's held so widely that what happens is we get lots and lots of teachers working with young children who haven't had a good math experience themselves and don't feel confident about it. So it's really an issue, and it's important that we help the caregivers of young children learn about mathematics. So in order to do that, I like to talk about my hero, Lee Shulman, who at a big educational conference in the late 1980s came up with this idea that there's content knowledge and then there's content knowledge that teachers need. And he called this pedagogical content knowledge. If we go on to the next slide, I can tell you about how this works. So, you know, you and I both know probably how to balance our bank statement, right? But if we were going to teach someone to do it who had no idea how to do it, we'd need to know the best models and analogies and representations for getting that idea across. We would need to know when questions come up in class, which ones of those questions should we follow to its conclusion and which ones should we kind of let it sit there and simmer for a while. And knowing what likely mistakes are that people are going to make when they learn the material. These are all things that teachers need to know about the content that they're going to teach that the layperson doesn't need to have. And now I want to convince you that these things exist in early mathematics. So if we can go on, because what we're wanting, right, let's remember this. It's really a kind of a mapping task. Children are hearing the word 3 in the language all the time. As Eric alluded to, they need to get that cardinal understanding. They need to understand that the word and the quantity, the threeness of 3 go together. And then once they've got that, there's an eventual task of learning to use symbols, right? So I think you might begin to see here how this is complicated, but it's also complicated in other ways. So this is an exercise that we often use with teachers in Head Start centers when we're working with them. And we say, which of these figures are the same? Well, the answer to this question is any pair of figures that you want to point out, right? Because you can talk about the two circles, you can talk about the two triangles, the two striped, the two orange, etc. And the point here is that it gets teachers recognizing that the way they decide what's the same and different is to point out different attributes, and that the answer changes depending on what we're looking for, right? What kind of glasses we put on. Well, that's also true with counting. In my next slide, this is another one that we commonly use with teachers: how many? And the thing is, there are lots of ways to answer this question, right? There are 15 avocado halves, but maybe you're focused on the fact that there are 8 pits, or that there are 3 rows of 5. Sometimes someone mentions that this might be 7.5 avocados. So all of those numbers, right, came up. There's, 15, 8, 5, and 7. Those numbers all depend on what it is we are counting. What's the unit? How are we describing this? And this is a central idea that we think teachers of young children need to understand. The reason we think they need to understand it is that in early childhood, a lot of teaching is sort of in the moment, right? In the play area, in the block corner. You have to be able to recognize when it's a good moment to provide information to a child that might help them think about something differently. So we do that with big ideas at Erikson Institute. We wrote a book that we're proud of that helps teachers learn about what we would call big ideas. Because we believe if a teacher's got those big ideas in mind, then when they're in those situations, they know how to take that opportunity and turn it into a learning moment. Because the big ideas are things that children need lots of exposure to and lots of
Well, I think we lost audio.
Hi, Jennifer, this is CGLR. We can't hear your audio, so we're trying to get that worked out.
Jill, maybe you can go on to the next person as your speaker comes back on.
Yep, we'll try to make that happen. Sierra, can you advance to the next set of slides? And we'll plan to come back to Jennifer as soon as we can get this worked out. Give us 1 second here.
Hi, everyone. And just to confirm, you can hear me, correct?
Yep, you're all good, Maggie.
Okay, great. So Jennifer, I'm sorry you got cut off. I was still counting avocados. But I'm Maggie Caspe, and I'm with the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. And I'm here with Gigliana Melzi from New York University, and we're going to share a little bit about a project we're working on that centers on listening to families' voices when it comes to early math. And we just heard from Eric and Jennifer how children's mathematical abilities are broad and deep and are really great predictors of later success, and most importantly, develop anywhere, anytime, starting at birth. And because of this, we know that families make a big difference when it comes to math. Research shows they make a difference by the way they engage in MathTalk and math activities. Families make a difference by maintaining mindsets and attitudes that promote math identities, and they make a difference when they connect children to math activities in the community. So it's really not surprising, like Eric said, that there are a growing number of programs and services designed to promote and foster family math. However, as you see on the next screen, all too often, initiatives developed for families often fail to be designed with families as partners. So in our work, we've been really trying to better understand by listening, observing, and talking with families, in particular families who are Spanish speaking and bilingual, how families mathematize their realities together. So in that spirit, in one moment, I'm going to show you a video of a family, and I'm going to ask you to use your math lens and look for as many mathematical concepts in the mother-child interaction that you can find. And this video was taped as part of a larger pilot project that Gigliana and I and a team at NYU worked on to understand math in the everyday lives of Latino families. And the video is in Spanish with captions below, and is about 2 minutes long. And what's important for you to know is that we went into this family's home and we brought a set of materials with us that you could see on the screen actually. And we simply asked this mother to teach her daughter how to set a birthday picnic table. And what's also important is that we did not tell the mother at all that this was a study about math. So all of the math talk that you're about to see and here is completely spontaneous. So as the video plays, please feel free to type in the chat box all the math that you see and hear.
Saca ¿cuántos platos? ¿Pequeños o grandes? Pequeños. Estos, mira. Somos 4, cada quien uno, ¿ok? 4 cada quien. Bueno, las sobrecitas las ponemos. Los chiquitos los ponemos en un ladito. Oh, está bien. Aquí. Este no es un plato. Sí es un plato, pero ponlo acá. Ahorita. Okay. Ahorita los vamos a poner. Oh, bueno. Y a ver, ¿de quién va a ser la fiesta? ¿De él o de él? ¿El monkey? A ver, primero, ¿quieres un gorrito? Para monkey. Oh, bueno, está bien. ¿Qué le pongo? Monkey. Es un happy birthday. Happy birthday. ¿Tú de qué color quieres? Tú de rojo. ¿Tú rojo? No, se me olvidó. ¿Y cuántos años va a cumplir? No sé. Vamos a ver. Hay que preguntarle. Pregúntale cuántos años cumple. No sé. Hola, Monkey. ¿Cuántos años vas a cumplir? Creo que dijo 3. 7. Oh, 7. Estás demasiado grande. Ok. A ver, primero te vamos a partir un pastel, ¿ok? No, yo se lo parto. No, pero primero le tenemos que cantar para que... Oh. Cántale. Los dos, las dos. Sí. 1, 2, 3.
Thanks for showing that video. And really great ideas popping up in the chat box. Ideas like shapes, 4 plates, little cookies, how many, small size, sorting, classifying. Angela A said cardinality, math vocabulary, shapes. one-to-one correspondence, size and amounts. It's just really great to see and really put on our math lenses and see all of this math that emerges. So I'm going to hand it over now to Gigliana, who's going to talk a little bit more about our current work and what we've been learning so far.
Thank you, Maggie, and good afternoon, everyone. Like my co-presenters, I'm really excited to be sharing our work with you here. So the spontaneous math interaction that you saw previously that Maggie presented was a pilot study for a project that we're conducting here at NYU. And our main intent is to really uncover the naturally occurring opportunities for early math learning in the homes of Spanish-speaking and Spanish-English bilingual families of preschool aged children. And so we partnered with 75 primary caregivers and their children. And we were working with Head Start families like Jennifer and in New York City, and 50% of these families were immigrant mothers and caregivers from Mexico. And the education ranged widely from about 6 years of formal education to about a little 1 or 2 years of university with an average of 11 years. Families participated in various activities, but today what we want to show you is give you a glimpse of how our families defined math and how they reported using math on a daily basis. Next slide. So before I share with you numbers, I wanted to give you a flavor of what our families say when we ask them to think about what math is and how they use math, right? So we see in the first example how math appears in play and how spontaneously it's happening in children's play. We see the mother's attitude towards math and how it's important for the future, and also how math is embedded in everyday life. And so, next slide, please. And so what we found very interesting and unsurprisingly is that when you ask parents to define math, they mostly talk about numbers and counting, but they also are talking about operations, measurement, and data, and something that we call applied math, because in here were things like math is solving problems, math is applying ideas, and then there was a few that was talking about patterns and spatial relations. Next slide, please. In terms of, next slide, please. In terms of how they were using math and how they reported using math, the great majority of families really used math in family-centered activities that guided their lives, like a functional purpose, the functional purpose of math, to shop and pay bills, to do household chores, to travel, to organize their days and schedules. But also we found that families reported being very intentional about wanting to teach their children the math. And you see that it's about half of our sample who are doing that, but also to entertain. So they were using math as a way of entertaining their children through play or while they were in the subway waiting for to get to their stop. Next slide, please. While we did not ask parents what they thought about math in terms of how do you feel about math, attitudes and perceptions about math also spontaneously emerge from our data. And what we find important is that about 40 of our 75 mothers really thought that math was everywhere, right? And there were both positive and negative perceptions towards math. And it was only the minority who said that math is not used. Next slide, please. So, well, you just saw that there are a lot of variations across families in both how they defined and used math. The majority of our families used math in their everyday lives and were aware of it, which is really important. And they used it in varied and nuanced ways. We've seen so many different videos, and we would be remiss if we did not point out that really the family math is happening in the context of relationships. And as you saw, when it's happening, it is fun and is joyful. Oftentimes, when we, in our attempts to support families, especially those who are underserved by our educational system and marginalized because they don't speak English, like happens with some of these families, or are immigrant, that happens with some of these families, or come from under-resourced communities, we tend to make assumptions of what families are doing or not doing. And I think that it is important in our attempts to support family math that we listen to and learn from families, and that in our attempts to support them, we really are uncovering what families are doing and meet them where they are to enhance and build on the practices that already exist. And so therefore, our attempts to develop resources should build from the knowledge and experiences of the families we're trying. Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from our commentator, Omowale from MathTalk.
How you doing? My name is Omowale, and I just wanted to make sure that is Jennifer going to have an opportunity to finish, or should I go now, or should she continue?
Jennifer, are you able to hear and see the slide deck? Jennifer, will give you a second. Hopefully we can get you on the line and go back to your slides. If not, Omo, then we'll go to you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Oh, great. Okay.
All right, why don't we, let's go back to Sierra. Can we go back to Jennifer's slides? Jennifer, if you can direct Sierra to the right number to use, that would, for her slides, that would be great. And then
Sure.
She can continue where she left off.
It's slide number 9 in my presentation. I'm not sure where it falls in the whole presentation, but it says 2 related big ideas at the top. You're almost there. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened, but I really appreciate the chance to continue. So I was talking about big ideas and how we focus on big ideas at Erikson because we want teachers to be able to be responsive in the middle of the classroom. And the way that works is if they've got ideas already about what kinds of math thinking children need opportunities to explore, just ideas they need experience with. So when we say can be used to sort collections into sets is a big idea. What we're saying to teachers is give kids lots of opportunities to sort stuff. Help them talk about it, help them define the language. Let's go on to the next slide. So we've designed some activities to also help teachers use this stuff in classroom in some teacher-directed ways as well. Here we see a picture of a teacher doing a people sort in a classroom. And you might notice that there's some boxes on the carpet in front of her. She's going to say something like, okay, let's have all the kids with laces on their shoes go in the red box, and all the kids with Velcro go in the black box. And then she might say, how many kids are in the Velcro box? And so the kids are learning that these kids can move around to different boxes depending on how we decide to sort them, because the next sort might be about whether you have buttons or not. And she's got an audience there. And for the audience, they're participating too, being involved, because part of it is the discussion. It's the language, it's the words, it's seeing the ideas and putting them together with the words. Then we also try to find ways to help teachers like this one connect what they're doing in the classroom to the home environment. And one way we do that is through books, through children's books. And there's a wonderful children's book called 5 Creatures, which we commonly send home and send to families. If we can go on to the next slide, you can see a picture, which will help me to, skip that one, please. Help you able to see this. So this is 5 Creatures by Emily Jenkins. It's a wonderful children's book about a family with 2 parents, a child, and 2 cats. And on each page of the book, the family is sorted in a different way. So on one page, it might be there are 3 creatures with red hair and 2 with black. And then on the next page, it might be there are 3 creatures who like to drink milk. There's one who only drinks it in coffee and one who is allergic. So that's an example of that kind of a book. So what we do is we have teachers use that in the classroom, we send it home. And then we use these forms to fill out so that children can fill them out. And let's go on to the next page and you'll see it's a form that says, this is who's in my house, right? So 4 creatures live in Ms. Iris's house. 3 creatures who are human and 1 who is a cat, and 2 creatures can drive a car and 2 teachers can't drive. So, and on the next page is an example of one that's just been hand-drawn by a family coming into the classroom from home. So this is a really great activity to do at the beginning of the school year when everyone is getting to know everyone else. And it connects what's happening at home and the discussions so that parents actually know what teachers are trying to work with their kids. So if you go on, this is our website. I think we've got it posted in several places for you to find the website, and if not, I'll put it into the chat. We have a lot of resources there. The little cloud thing on the upper right-hand corner, Idea Library, if you click there, you can sort and filter and find videos and postings about all kinds of early math topics. What we're seeing here is a video that's actually designed to be shown to families to help them understand what it is that the teachers are hoping they'll do with those forms when they send them home. And then if we go to the next slide, I just want to take us out with a few thoughts. These are the directions we're looking at, right? I love hearing from my colleagues about the importance of collaboration with families and with centers, right? So, you know, the families that we're working with and the centers, they need, if we're going to work with them, it has to be easy, it has to be useful. So we're learning about collaborating not just in the research phase, but in the design phase. How do we develop things together that really draw on all those funds of knowledge that are there? Understanding the role of culture better is important in our work, and emphasizing that ease of use. And then also virtual communications between families and centers are possible. And so we're doing some work developing protocols and ways that teachers and caregivers can talk together about what's happening in classrooms and what's happening in home so that there's really a two-way sharing of information. And there's that website. And that's it from me. And I think we're passing it to Omo.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so as I get started, I just wanted to thank the campaign for having me and being able to participate in this session, and just wanted to share a little bit about my journey here. And so first and foremost, I began this work as a son. And so my dad founded an organization called the Algebra Project, and my brother and sisters were the original kind of guinea pigs of that work. And so math has always been something that has been part of my family and something that I've seen as really important. And through that work across elementary and high school and into college, I really got a sense of how math could be taught differently. And so for me, the Algebra Project really laid a foundation for, how you can learn math in a community context, how you can learn math through conversation, and how that was empowering to young people as they began to really identify and take ownership of the math that was all around them. And so I'm also here as a father. I have two kids that are two wonderful kids. So Johari is 8 and Kamara is 6. And so naturally, I was really interested in the relationship that I could have with them around learning, and particularly math learning. And I wanted math to be something that we enjoyed doing. And so for my son and I, math was out in the neighborhood. We would do math while we were riding trains, while we were making breakfast, playing ball at the park. And I just saw how he really developed a math lens and developed agency around engaging me in conversations about all the math that was around him. And so next slide, please. It just felt like there was a tremendous opportunity to think about, how do we support adults and kids to have positive early math experiences where they're at. So whether at home, whether out and about in the neighborhood, or in a school context, it felt like there was a need and an opportunity to be able to do that. And so, my initial kind of foundation for this work were the experiences I had with the Algebra Project, but then really quickly as I began to explore the early math space, I, met Jennifer. I bumped into and got introduced to the Erikson Institute, and really began to learn more about the power of early math. And so, the things that Eric talked about, that Margaret talked about, and Jennifer talked about, all that research that was available, it became, it was new to me. And it just felt like there was a strong foundation, both a research foundation and a curriculum foundation, to just think about, what would it mean to kind of really activate the mathematics that is in our backyards. And so, in addition to that, as we began thinking about that work, we also began getting connected with other groups that were thinking about kind of activating public spaces. And so the Playful Learning Landscape crew had begun to do research, and there was a supermarket study, there was some studies in the playground. And so they were also exploring just this idea of playful learning and how we transform our environments to support these types of experiences. And so next slide, please. That led me to thinking about, how we elevate mathematics and connect mathematics across the classroom, the community, and at home. And so MathTalk is really looking at developing resources that support positive early math interactions. We want adults to feel comfortable having conversations with their kids, whether it's a caregiver, a parent, a teacher. And we want kids to have a really positive math identity. We want them to be confident and comfortable engaging the adults in their lives around exploring all the math that is around them. And so next slide, please. What we began thinking about was really creating resources that could help do that. And it's been a long process. And I'm really thankful for the people that have been part of that journey and have helped us really think about that. And so we have 3 types of experiences, and they're basically integrated. One experience really focuses on the physical landscape. And so thinking about, what do parents and kids do while they're at the park, while they're at a bus stop, waiting for the bus to come, while they're in a hospital waiting room. These all are potential opportunities for them to have interactions with the math that is kind of natural to that environment. And so we've explored that, and we have begun to develop community-based hotspots to support early math learning. And we've also begun to think about how, we can think differently about screen time and think differently about how technology can be used to increase the likelihood that adults and kids have these types of interactions, and also kind of deepen the types of conversations and experiences that they have together. Next slide, please. And so this is a picture of a park in Worcester, Mass. And so we're working with the Worcester Head Start Network and Worcester South Main CDC, which is a community development company. And they're interested in, you know, how to transform that space. So when you go into the park, math is elevated and kids can interact with the math that's in that environment. Next. And so this is an example of, you know, what that looks like. And so MathTalk installations or hotspots combine some kind of signage. You know, we've explored temporary and permanent signage. And then the majority of the installations are things that you can place on the ground. And essentially what we've done is really look at, you know, what are the kind of the designs that kids experience in classrooms, like a number line, like Venn diagrams, like a coordinate grid. And so these are things that they're familiar with, but how can we bring those things out into the neighborhood and have kids engaging those things in fun and exciting ways? And so on the next slide, we have the app, one of the apps that we've created and is launching in the next couple weeks. And it's a riff off of Apple's Measure app. And the idea is that, you know, in addition to being able to measure different objects with standard units of measurement, we can also engage kids in measuring spaces and objects with non-standard units of measurement. And so in this picture, you know, a kid is measuring another person's height in apples. We're comparing the size of, you know, different bears, and we're measuring the number line in squiggly anacondas. And so we have a short video that me and my kids put together, which illustrates some of this.
Would you two like to share what you're doing? So I am measuring and seeing which is bigger between the panda bear, a polar bear, and a grizzly bear. And I found out that the polar bear is the biggest. All right. Can you show us your animals first?
Now you can see them. I have a polar bear, a grizzly bear, one polar bear, one grizzly bear, and one panda bear. Not that? Yeah.
How about that?
All right, go start at 10. You got 10 rows of 6. How many is that?
10 rows of 6, 60.
All right, and you got 2 more rows. 6.
66, 72.
How many polar bears in the yard?
72.
Cool. Approximately. Tamara, you standing up against the wall?
Yeah.
I want to see how many apples tall she is. 9, 10, 11, 11 and a half apples. What? Cool. All right, now let me do inches. How many inches do you think are 11 and a half apples? What? 41 inches.
We're going to the alley. Let's see what we're gonna get here.
What do you got? How many anacondas?
It's a 1 and a 3.
What number is that? Can you see them?
Yes. How many I got?
Looks like 13 anacondas. What?
Now what?
You're all set. You could go in the house.
And watch.
Yep. So that was Kamara and Johari, and that's our work. And so look forward to connecting with folks and being able to share more. And happy to introduce Vito Borrello, the executive director of NAFSCE. And I just wanted to give him a quick shout out because one of my colleagues, Keith Griffin, attended the NAFSCE training last week or the week before last, and he came back on fire. And so I'm super excited about what you do and your work in the family math space.
Thanks so much, Omo. I think as you can all see, Omo's just done some incredibly innovative and relevant work. And we are so pleased to have been selected to lead this initiative. And I want to just start by thanking the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, who is a longtime partner of ours for co-hosting this webinar today. And also our founding funder, Heising-Simons, who's really taken a leadership role in funding this, and Kim, the Overdeck Foundation, who really provided the resources so that we can really look to scale up family math in a way that we demystify it so that all families are practicing family math in ways that improve learning. You know what, I want to kind of share why we decided to pursue this. You know, you see our mission to the left, and you know, our focus is engaging families in ways to promote child development and improve student achievement and school improvement. And we are not necessarily family math experts. So when we were made aware of this opportunity, we determined that if we could find the ideal early math partner, it could really be a dynamic partnership. And so that was Erikson. And you saw Jennifer a little bit earlier. We're incredibly excited to work with Erikson, really as our lead partner in this work, to create an initiative that really, and a movement that really scales up this work. Also, two additional partners that are involved with us in this initiative include the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. We are committed to having an equity lens in everything that we do, and the Institute for Educational Leadership. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that they'll be doing in this initiative. And if you could advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is our preliminary thinking, and I just want to share it with all of you. Our preliminary thinking is that we would create a national center on family math, something that has its own identity, that stands on its own, but that we are supporting and that is aligned with everything at NAFSCE that we do. We imagine dedicated staff, certainly a center director, and then a variety of other staff that we'll bring on at NAFSCE and through our partners, Erikson and others, to really be able to scale this up. We have this opportunity because for the last 2 years, Education First has really been incubating this project, and a variety of individuals and organizations who have participated as stakeholders through coordinating committees, through work groups. And so it is our intention to build on the assets that have already been established in this work, and to create a strategic planning process, and also to amplify parent voice. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You can advance to the next slide. So at this point, these are the 5 outcomes that we are focused on. Over the next 10 months, we kind of have a transitional process in working with Education First and the coordinating committee that's already established in all of the work groups. And so outcome 1 is really about NAFSCE and our partners better understanding the work around family math, really listening and learning. And outcome 2, and this is part of it, engaging new and existing strategic audiences. So this is purposeful. NAFSCE has a huge audience. Campaign for Grade Level Reading has a huge audience. And so many already in family math. There are so many constituencies that are involved in this project. And we want to create a movement where all of us co-own this. So this is really part of the launch of that, if you will, in terms of this transitional process. And that will lead to outcome 3, which is engaging in a strategic planning process. And I realize that sounds probably not so exciting, but when we created NAFSCE in 2014, one of the first things we did is to really think about how do we create a strategic planning process that's about co-development and co-ownership. You know, not something that we're doing internally where we're just sort of pushing something out on people, but how do we bring people in to help us think about the vision for this work, and then be able to scale it up and have really a large constituency co-own this with us. And that is what our intention is. So we look forward to engaging many of you in really helping us to think about what is the vision to scale up family math in a way that creates systemic impact. And then that leads to outcome 4. We believe that in order for that to happen, there has to be an infrastructure in place. So we are at this point, it's preliminary, but we are imagining a center on family math that is also a network, a strong and comprehensive and broad network for this work that works to advance this movement. With dedicated staff, with a commitment to identity and brand, and really and then outcome 5, a communications strategy that is really around how are we demystifying math so that all families, no matter their education level, understand the power that they have, the influence that they have on their children to be able to support their learning of math. You heard earlier from Jennifer and from Kim, it's significant. It's incredibly significant to student achievement, to high school graduation. And so this is an opportunity for us to really advance a communications campaign that's already been started to create a movement for this work. And we hope that you'll work with us over the next 10 months. And then as we launch this kind of officially next year in moving this initiative forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim for questions and answers. Questions and discussion.
Thanks so much, Vito, and thank you. Thanks so much, Vito, and thank you for not making me answer all of the questions. I think at this point, we're going to ask all of our panelists to come back on so participants can see our faces and as we're chatting. So thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to all the participants for all the amazing questions you've been asking and comments that you've been putting in the chat and your engagement. We had one comment that I just wanted to lift up for everyone before we get into the Q&A, and that was from Rose, who suggested thanking parents who are at the center of all of this. And I think that that's true on 2 levels. I want to say, yes, this is all about parents and families, and we owe them so much respect and thanks for raising the next generation of powerful math learners and math doers. But I also want to call out that as part of the Family Math Roadmap work, Rose and other parents are part of our Parent Advisory Council, and they have done incredible work in the advocacy realm and beyond, and thinking about what it would take to really bring messages and resources to families and have family voice represented in what we're doing. So, and I see Maggie nodding because she knows that that's been something that we've worked on. And so thank you, Rose, for that comment and for reminding us of who is at the center of the work that we're doing and who's really driving it. I want to ask a quick question. Omo, we had a question that you can answer immediately, and I have a feeling that the person who asked it is not the only person wondering, how can they get the MathTalk app in their community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess maybe the best way, I can put my email and a colleague's email in the chat, and folks can just email us directly. The app will be available in about 3 weeks on the App Store, but you know, we can get folks registered or pre-registered to get access to the app. But we're also just happy to be in conversation with folks about you know, anything related to that and other MathTalk products.
Thanks so much. We had a question that just came across in the chat, and I wanted to ask that too, because I think it's probably something that others are wondering. And this one, Vito, maybe you want to field this one. Someone's wondering how other organizations can get involved in the work that we're doing for family math.
So we're thinking about that right now. We do intend to have a broad strategic planning process to engage stakeholders. Literally, this was announced, what, Kim, maybe less than 2 days ago, and we've been hitting the ground running. And thankfully, really, how often do you get almost a year of planning and transition time. So we couldn't be doing that if it wasn't for the Heising-Simons Foundation and the Overdeck Foundation providing us with the resources and the luxury of time to be able to think together. But it is our expectation that we will have a plan for a strategic planning process that will start sometime early in 2021. And we'll be thinking about engaging stakeholders. And what I would suggest is feel free to go on our website at nafsce.org. And there are opportunities to comment there. And if you have interest, please let us know and we will be creating a list. We will be creating a web presence. That will be something that we do this year so that people can even more easily be engaged. But in the meantime, don't hesitate to go on our website. And my information is there as well, so you can feel free to email me.
Okay, thanks so much, Vito. The next question I'm going to queue up, I think for Eric and Omo have some expertise in this area. So I'm going to start with Omo. And Monty's been very patient because this question was asked towards the beginning of our conversation today. What do you think about adaptive math programs? And DreamBox is called out as an example of those when we're thinking about early math.
Mm-hmm. So I haven't had specific experience with DreamBox, but my kids have been involved with ST Math. And so I think I like that it's visual and kind of puzzle based and that it's supporting them to kind of move through different concepts through, you know, as they kind of through a visual experience. And I think with all this stuff, I spend a lot of time just kind of sitting with them, observing kind of how they're going through it and beginning to have conversations with them about it and trying to get a sense of what they're picking up from the app and the technology and, you know, what are ways in which, you know, I can try to enhance that. And so I think whatever the program is, you know, I think there are some benefits, but I think they're not kind of the end all in terms of, you know, what is going to help move kids forward in terms of learning math and being confident in math. And so I think there needs to be that combination between, you know, whatever the visual experience is and adults kind of supporting that and interacting with kids around that.
Thanks so much. Eric, did you have anything that you want to add to that?
Well, I'll just build on, I mean, I completely agree with everything Omo said. And, you know, I also don't have direct experience using DreamBox. I know that it has, it does have evidence that has been consistent with what works clearinghouse standards. I guess I would, though, without having used the app myself, just pushing towards, you know, Kathy Hirsch-Pasek and her colleagues who are learning scientists have really talked about whether it's an app or whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in the home or whether it's in the park, that there are really kind of 4 pillars of learning. And I do believe that, you know, I think DreamBox, for example, was developed with some learning scientists involved, but so it very well may have these, but I would just encourage people to be thinking about her points around, you know, the first pillar is active involvement. You know, are kids learning actively versus passively, right? We've known this for a long time. Are they able to engage with the material in the app without being distracted by non-learning materials within the app? Like there's a piece of what are they engaging with in the app? And that's true though outside of apps. Then there's this piece around, is it meaningful? Does it relate to life? Do kids see it? You know, you see with Omo's app, you know, this is meaningful. Like they understand this connects to life and makes it something more than just what's happening inside the app. I mean, you know, Omo with MathTalks has just done this great job of each of these pillars actually. And then the 4th pillar, so you've got active, engaged, meaningful, and then social, just what Omo finished with. Does it lead you to relate with others as well? Relate to life and relate with others, and whether that's family members, whether that's peers. So I think you can apply that to, you know, and as you as individuals, as educators, as community members, as family members, look at apps. Does it, you know, does it live by those kind of 4? And it's not just apps though. It's anything you're doing in terms of learning.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks so much. The next question I'm going to queue up for us comes from Kathy, who's asking, what are some of the strategies or talking points that we could share with participants to help them sort of talk with people who are not in early care and education, help them understand that early math is extremely important. And I didn't do this in advance to say who I was going to call on, but I'm gonna ask Maggie to weigh in on this first, and then others can as well, because I know Maggie's thinking an awful lot about the communications aspect of early math and family math.
Yeah, so at the roadmap project that we've been working on, we've actually been thinking a lot about communications and thinking about what are some of the best ways that we present the importance of early math and family math to everyone. And some of the ideas that we've been playing around with are ideas like Math Moves the World and larger campaigns like that. But I'll just also put a nod to, one of the things that we think a lot about is also this idea that math happens everywhere all the time. And this is something that the families in the study that Gigliana and I were part of, and everything that you heard a little bit from Jennifer and Eric and Gigliana say. So there's this real recognition that this is something that everybody sees it, everybody understands it. There's something about math happening everywhere all the time, and that it moves the world. And how do we dig a deeper into that? And how do we create opportunities for everyone to be part of that? And how are we as practitioners reaching out to families consistently with that messaging and raising up their voices and reinforcing what families do and creating those broad networks and communities to do that? I think that's the big question. And the answer that many of you who work with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading have some of those answers to at your fingertips.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Did anyone else want to weigh in on ways that we might talk with folks who aren't in the early education space about the importance of math?
Well, I'll chime in. I said this a little bit earlier. I think one of our goals is how do we demystify math? I mean, no matter even if you are highly educated, as a parent of two daughters, I remember what it was like to help them with their math homework and how different it was when I was a student. And so what I think many families, and particularly families that may not be as highly educated, they don't necessarily understand the influence and the power that they have to support math in their children. Simple activities that they can be doing, whether it's going to the grocery store, or you saw some of the going to the park, recipes, cooking. I mean, there are so many things that parents can do to support early math. And I think what we need to do is figure out how do we communicate that in a way that it really does demystify this issue of math and help parents understand that they can play an important role. All families can play an important role.
Yeah, Kim, I would. Oh, go ahead. No, Gigliana, you go.
No, I think that I just wanted to add to that. I think that one way in which we can do that is by really highlighting the way that math is happening in our lives, irrespective. I think that we think about math happening only in schools and only with people with a lot of education. But if we think about carpentry, construction, there are all these jobs where math is happening daily, right? I think that making families understand that that what they're doing is math. So they are math doers, right? They are engaging in math. I think that actually demystifies it a bit, as in order to do math, you have to be with high education.
I was just gonna, I completely agree with all of these points. I would just add, in terms of thinking about framing and not knowing from the question asker exactly what audience they're talking about, but I think you've heard it mentioned a few times today that early math is an equity issue. And that equity is kind of cuts in two directions. One is that early math is critical from a life chances standpoint. That is, we want everyone to have opportunities, right? And we know now that early math is part of that process. But it's also the case it's an equity issue because early math doesn't just belong to some certain group of people that, look a certain way or live a certain place or talk a certain way. and that I mentioned in my talk that there are legacy of outstanding mathematics, which are the reasons that humans are on this planet across cultures, and helping families and communities recognize both of those equity pieces too, I would just say, can complement a number of things that Gigliana and Vito and Maggie were pointing out.
Thanks so much, Eric. I've been asked to remind everyone to please take the poll that's posted right now while we continue the Q&A. So please do share your ideas with us, your opinions with us. Someone at the very top of the webinar, it says anonymous attendee on my so otherwise I would call you out by name. So ask what are some strategies for teaching math concepts to preschool students? And I know we heard, especially I think from Jennifer, on some of those strategies, but Jennifer, would you mind just jumping in and maybe reiterating or going, adding a few, if you would, for the attendee who's interested in those strategies?
Sure. So I think you heard me talk about the idea of big ideas and teachers having in mind the kinds of experiences they want kids to have, right? The key is setting up that experience and then talking with children about it. I mean, the conversation and math talk are really powerful ways to help children think mathematically, and that's because the words help them clarify their thinking, right? And so anytime that you're helping a child become more logical, you're helping them organize their world, you're helping them classify their world, sort it, and compare it. All of those things are basic to mathematical thinking. So it doesn't have to be complex. It's a matter of talking with kids about it. And that's when we work with teachers, we emphasize that a great deal, right? We usually start by trying to remind the teachers of what it's like when you don't know what 3 means, to try to figure it out, which is not an easy thing for most adults to do. I mean, when would we think about that? But it really is kind of a mysterious understanding. The 3-ness of 3 doesn't just come. It comes with exposure to adults and people and talking about quantity and seeing it, right? So we remind teachers about that, and then we try to give them lots of ways to do it. And you can do that with families too. I mean, there are many, many opportunities. No one's mentioned folding laundry. I think that's my favorite home-based math activity because of all the sorting and organizing, and I'm such a big fan of the whole categorizing thing that is relevant to math. I hope that it helps.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Was there anyone else who wanted to weigh in on strategies? We also have a related question about Daniel's asking us for resources that describe the conceptual development of number and other mathematical concepts for young children. So what do children begin with? When do they develop cardinality, ordinality, numerical representation? And I think some of us can probably rattle off some of those resources. Jennifer, why don't you start with what you all have developed at Erikson and other things as well, and then Eric, maybe you can jump in as too.
Sure. So we have a book that we wrote for teachers of young children that's focused on big ideas, and each chapter sort of talks about a different area of mathematics, right? So it might be number sense or it might be counting. That's really written for teachers in classrooms, but a lot of the ideas are applicable in any setting with small children, and it will give you a good sense of development. But also the website, I really do encourage people to go there because we've worked hard to put a lot of resources on there. A lot of ways to read things, download things, watch things that can help you think about development in mathematical thinking. But I know Eric's got a lot of resources too, so let's hear from him.
Yeah, I just put in a plug for Erikson as well. Erikson has a number of these resources. Early Development Education Development Center, EDC, has a number of great resources. And then I'd also put a plug in for the DREME Network, so for Development and Research in Early Math Education, which is an organization that Gigliana and I are network members of. Maggie has been working closely with us, as well as others here. And so we have on our website, and I believe that that you'll get, all the participants are going to get links to all of these different websites, but we have resources that go domain by domain for educators as well as for teacher educators, as well as for families and practitioners. And so thinking about this in different contexts, but in tackling all of these great domains that Jennifer talked about. So yeah, I would check out all those different sites.
Terrific. Thanks, Eric. We have so many questions. I'm fearful we're not going to get to all of them, but one has caught my eye. I'm gonna ask Gigliana and Maggie and anyone else who wants to weigh in, but I think it really relates to the work that you do. Panelists, have any of the panelists have some early thinking about creating the infrastructure and systems to bridge family and school, to bridge that, what is too often a divide between those two learning spaces for young children. Of course, that same young child, that one young child is navigating those multiple spaces. And what happens once you're bringing in early math? How do we leverage assets? So Veronica asked that question. I thought you two would be well poised to answer it.
I think that, and Maggie, feel free to jump in at any time. I think that for me, the first thing is very important that that school context recognizes what families are doing, and kind of when we see families, and especially families of color, families that don't speak Spanish, families that are coming from under-resourced communities, we see children as coming into school as half empty glasses, right? And I think that we need to start thinking about and seeing them as half full and identify what is it that they're coming with, so that we can build and enhance from there, right? And I think that unfortunately in the US and across the world, there's certain communities that tend to be marginalized, and there's a mainstream narrative about the children that are coming from those communities. And I think that we need to start thinking about what they're bringing, and that's a way, and the responsibility should not be on the parents. We are in a highly diverse country, and it's the responsibility of the school to understand the diversity of the children that are coming into the school and the classroom.
Kim, I'd like to chime in. I think this is where some of the systemic work that NAFSCE is doing so connects to this work. So some of you know that we've been working with the Council for Chief State School Officers in 18 states, state education agencies, state education departments who have developed birth through grade 12 family engagement frameworks for their state. And so we see that work and how we're being strategic around family engagement, how we're being intentional in making sure that there is a bridge between home and school, and making sure that educators are prepared to engage families, all families, in culturally responsive ways that can support this work. And so that systemic side of it, as well as the program side of it, I think both of those are really important, and that we'll be focusing on both of those.
Appreciate that, Vito. Thanks so much. I think we had another question about our messages, perhaps, for programs or teachers who are still working with worksheets or a box curriculum, and when asked sort of why they're doing that in preschool to teach math, their response is that they're preparing children for real school. So does anyone have some thoughts on that? I have a feeling many people have thoughts on that, but I'd love one of you to jump in and answer that question. Who's brave?
Jennifer, do you want to take it?
Well, I think it depends. Is the question, how do we help that teacher see something different? What's the question?
I think that's part of it, but I'm also hearing how do you help them see something different about how doing math in a less paper and pencil way, a more joyful way, a more interactive way is preparing them for school?
Well, here's a piece that I think about a lot, which is that we lose way too many kids by third grade. At that point, there's a whole bunch of kids who've decided math is not for them. And to me, that suggests a lot more about how we're teaching it than about the kids or about the math. If math doesn't make sense to you, if it seems silly, If it's arbitrary and it doesn't connect to your life, why would you bother learning it? So I think it's not that worksheets are an evil, right? There's probably a good role for a worksheet every once in a while. I know that's a radical thing to say, but it's probably true. But I think the main thing is to keep the math meaningful for kids so that it connects to their life and they understand what they're doing. We lose them. We lose them quickly. And once they're lost, it's really hard to get them back.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And I know other people would love to weigh in on that. And we have so many great questions. I want to thank our participants for coming, being with us for the last 90 minutes. We have to wrap up. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and NAFSCE for co-hosting us this afternoon. And Sarah, I think I'm kicking it back to you.
Sarah, we lost your audio. Let's try that one more time.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go. Yep, you're good.
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to say thank you to you as well, Kimberly. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for moderating it and lifting up so many important points. The campaign, we're incredibly excited about this new partnership and looking forward to being a part of it and leveraging it to support children and families. I am so very sorry for early math that we have run out of our 90 minutes together, but I hope that you will continue to join us for more of these sessions. You can see on your screen, we've got a robust calendar for the remaining weeks in November as well as early December. So I hope that you will continue to join in with us for these conversations as we learn together and work to move the needle around early literacy and early math for young children. But thank you all to all of our panelists, and thank you to all of you who joined in for today's conversation. Take care.